speaking of which, when I learned I'd be introducing Judith Martin, Miss Manners, today, all I could think was, keep your elbows off the podium, keep your elbows off the podium. That's because, as fans of the author know, Martin has been the standard bearer of etiquette in the United States for forever. Since launching her popular Miss Manners column in 1978, she's guided readers who are feeling incorrect, offering advice on behaving properly in a wildly improper world, and doing it with a wonderfully dry wit. A prolific author, Martin's latest book, Miss Manners, Mind Your Business, which is co-written with her son Nicholas, who was going to be here today but could not be, helps readers navigate the minefield of the modern workplace and do so with their sanity and propriety intact. So please join me in welcoming Miss Manners, Judith Martin. Okay.
Thank you. Yes, my co-author was going to be here, but he had an etiquette dilemma. He's my son, so you can imagine he's extremely well brought up. But even if people who are perfect sometimes have etiquette dilemmas, which I'll tell you about. But that's not the way people think of etiquette. I'm well aware. They think of it not so much in terms of choices as in or else. You know, just memorize a bunch of forks that are related to foods that you don't want to eat anyway, and then you'll be home free. Which might have helped a little if you wanted to social climb in the 1880s. But, and it depends on how high you were trying to climb, because those specialized forks were invented by a rising industrial class, and the upper classes were trying very hard to disassociate themselves with it because they didn't want to be known as they used to say so charmingly, the kind of people who buy their silver. But anyway, all those forks were melted down for silver in World War I, all except the ones I kept. So it wouldn't do you much good. And there are a lot of people who are under the impression that etiquette requires always making everybody else feel comfortable, even while they're walking all over you. In which case, even I wouldn't subscribe to it. Etiquette does have its defenses. It does not include being rude back, of which many people seem to believe. But it is a more complicated question. So my son's etiquette dilemma was, one, always keep your commitments. You know, we don't care for the kind of, oh, I'm a casual kind of person, I like to be spontaneous, so I may or may not show up at your wedding. We don't care for that. But there's another etiquette duty, which is don't give other people the flu. So he thought maybe that's the prevailing one, and the poor soul is suffering from it, and he said even people who are sitting safely far enough away from him, if he were here, it would go against the rule, don't make other people observe the visual and other effects of your having the flu. So he apologizes, and he's very sorry to miss this. We love book fairs, and of course books. I also wrote a book with my daughter previously, and both children are now contributing to the newspaper column. I think I may have misunderstood the term bring your children to work. I thought it was put your children to work, which I have done. That's an old American tradition, you know. What do you think we give you the summer off from preschool for? I mean, don't play in the sand, till the soil. So, but we have child labor laws in this country, so I didn't put them to work until both of my children were firmly established in other careers. Careers other than what I picked. My own career, of course, consists of passing myself off as a harmless little old lady who just wants everybody to be a little nicer. While I'm actually taking ruthless aim at that relentless barrage of dumb ideas that keep sweeping through the society. No, I don't think the world will be a better place if you go around hugging strangers and grabbing them. And I don't want you to be perfectly honest with me, because I know it means that you're just itching to say something unpleasant. And I don't believe that the reason that you keep checking your email and your texting during other people's weddings and funerals and parties is on the chance that a neighbor might be calling you to tell you that your house is on fire. And I especially don't want to hear how I can contribute my money to the noble cause of buying you the luxuries that you've always dreamed of having. Now, you might say the children, my children, chose fields related to mine. My daughter's in improv comedy. She teaches that at Second City in Chicago. And my son, and co-author of this book, is the director of operations at the Lyric Opera of Chicago, which is one of the places he learned about business manners and urged me to go into this. Growing up in a obviously polite environment, my house, they seem to have picked up the idea of annoying, I don't mean annoying, I mean reforming other people for their own good. And they wanted to take on the business world, both of them. 5 years ago, when my daughter was getting married, and she was therefore naturally steeped in what she called bridal porn, those 10-pound magazines and the internet sites that teach you how to practice extortion on strangers. They tell you all these expensive things that you have to have. And of course, they drive me crazy by saying these things are required by etiquette, all these vulgar things that we condemn. And then knowing that you can't afford it, they tell you how to get other people, your wedding guests, your families, and others to help you pay for it. So we wanted to take on the huge bridal industry, which we did. We collaborated on Miss Manner's Guide to a Surprisingly Dignified Wedding. And then my son wanted to take on not just one industry at a time, but the structure and the assumptions of the entire current business world. And he's been in a number of aspects of it. Journalism, he was publisher of the Washington Monthly at one time. The national budget, even the healthcare part of it, in several administrations ago, and he worked for OMB, and now opera. So he seems to have a predilection for those low-key, conflict-free businesses where emotions are kept under control. One of the main themes of our book, Miss Manners Minds Your Business, is the need to separate private life, your family and your friends from your professional life. Written by Martin and Son, together since 1966. Oops. But oddly enough, we have no trouble seeing which part of our lives is which. We celebrate birthdays and we meet deadlines, but we know the difference between them. We don't sacrifice one for the other, and we don't allow one to intrude on the other. But other people do not seem to be able to handle this. I've had countless letters from people who are plagued with the need to celebrate birthdays and showers of colleagues they may barely know and not even like, and they're desperate for an excuse to get out of them. And I find this odd because they have no trouble pleading work when blowing off the celebrations of friends and family, canceling social engagements, not showing up, or not even answering in case they might have to work. And if they do, texting during dinner, checking emails during ceremonies, presumably they're catching up on all the work they didn't do when they were partying at the office. And they agonize, again, I get avalanches of mail on this, over what secret Santa presents to get for their coworkers. But they just pay their relatives. Every time you send them a check, every time they pass go, which they keep passing with births and weddings and birthdays and graduations, engagements and divorces, even funerals, everyone is on the go all the time, it seems, and on the take. Well, what's going on here? What's going on is that people have switched their manners. They practice social manners in the workplace and business manners in their private lives. Now, I've been a long time dealing with bad manners, good manners, disgusting manners, don't ask. But this is a new one. This is misplaced manners. When you're hiring an employee nowadays, you want to know about his or her hopes and dreams, their problems, their weaknesses. And if you have an expense account, you might do a leisurely lunch to go over all these things. However, when you're looking for a romantic partner, you take out a classified advertisement, you hold brief interviews over, at the most, a cup of coffee, and you're very interested in discussing the income level. I trace a lot of this confusion to some of American society's sweetest, most cherished, and most disastrous ideas. One is ladylike behavior. Now, goodness knows I'm not against ladylike behavior or gentlemanly behavior either. I'd like to see a little more of both. I'm even old enough to remember when the law considered itself a gentlemanly profession. But the definition of ladylike behavior is very different from that of a gentleman. A man might be a gentleman and a scholar, or an officer and a gentleman, but he understands that the two aspects require different sorts of manners, that you don't behave on the battlefield the way you would in the drawing room, and vice versa. But of course, ladies weren't supposed to be on the battlefield. So a lady was either a lady or she was not a lady, and we all knew what that meant. The problem was first apparent to me when women began to move up in the workplace, sometimes known as when women entered the workplace, which is ridiculous. Since the beginning of time, poor women have always worked, and rich men very often didn't. But women were using, the manners that we had, social manners, and that includes, and it applies to gentlemen too, you won't believe this because these things have not been in great practice lately, but it includes a ban on bragging, a ban on discussing money. You're not supposed to ask people as a social question how much they paid for their shoes. But on the job, these things don't work very well. The business world is a little bit handicapped if you don't discuss money. And for women, it translated into not claiming credit for work, which seemed like bragging, not asking for raises because that was discussing money, and so on. Habits are very hard to shake, and it took a long time to realize that none of this was a good career strategy. But then the very strangest thing happened, which is that while women were trying to adapt, some of them by behaving like very ungentlemanly men, the workplace started demanding social behavior from everyone. Get more into this in a minute. But another related bad idea is the decades-old idea that all antagonisms are a result of miscommunication, and that if people only knew one another better, they would all love one another. I don't know about that. I mean, whom do you know better than the person you're divorcing? It's the distance offered by a professional demeanor that enables people who really don't like one another to work together in a civil and cooperative manner without mandating affection that is needed for friendship. Plus which, we now have total communication. The therapeutic advice for troubled people used to be that if communicate more. Well, now we're communicating everything. Here's what I had for breakfast, and here's a picture of it, and so on. Do you like these people better who are boring you to death? I rather doubt it. And open communication led to the cubicle office. That and the fact that it's cheaper to build an office without private rooms. And that indeed has not led to a degree of affection among people who are working so closely together. Then there's the current guidance, another of these social fads, that parents give their children, good, well-meaning parents. And what do they say to them? They say, just be yourself. Well, some help that is. I mean, who else were you planning to be? And judging from the common defense of rudeness, people say, I'm just being true to myself. It's not a very pretty self. What gets lost here is the idea that people can have multiple selves. The person who behaves the same in a job interview as when partying out with the pals is probably not going to get the job. And the employee who behaves like that at an office party may not be able to keep the job. But people who have been brought up with the sole instruction of being true to themselves have a hard time with the idea that yourself is actually different in different contexts. I mean, come on, you're not even the same person before and after you've had your coffee in the morning. So, as a result of these problems these ideas have created, here I am in apparently violation of one of etiquette's main directives, which is to mind your own business, which I would do if the current system were working. I would not dream of interfering. But look at the unintended consequences of mixing and reversing social and business manners. First of all, there is a pervasive phoniness about it. We Americans are supposed to despise phoniness, but it is everywhere. We pretend that our coworkers are our friends. We pretend that since there's a little use of titles, either personal titles like Mr., Ms., or job titles, that there's no hierarchy in the office. And because we wear leisure clothes and we can play video games, we pretend that it's really not a workplace. Very phony. My next book, I think, is maybe on the greatest phoniness of all, which is the pretense that neither we nor people that we want to flatter ever age. But that's another book. It is carried to the extreme of believing older people like myself, not myself, but my generation, believe that if they forego the dignities due to age, then everybody will think they're young. It's kind of a bargain with the devil. But I'm digressing. Workplace phoniness is a tragedy both for those who believe in it and for those who don't, and most people have a mixture of both. In the modern workplace, we do sort of seem to be equal. Everybody's on a first-name basis, informally dressed. There's a lot of informal chatter, no closed doors, food spread around everywhere. But then, surprise, your pals turn out to behave like rivals or bosses. What a betrayal of friendship. And if you bought into the idea that you're just one big family, are you going to be embarrassed to ask for a raise in your allowance? At the same time, work identity has obliterated social identity, so that old opener of how do you do has changed into what do you do? And apparently nobody feels confident of doing enough to be impressive, and hence we have all that self-advertising in the social media which killed the meaning of the word friend and is now killing the meaning of the word social. Your social life is where you troll for admiration and advantages, not where you relax and enjoy yourself. The notion that coworkers should also be friends is now really inescapable. that the idea is everywhere that the way to build a loyal and productive team is to foster personal bonds. Really? Your friends are the people you play with. Is that what the boss wants? Wouldn't it be better if, say, people got some work done? And why would you want to allow your boss to pick your friends, or for that matter, to send them away so that you can't play with them anymore? And what if you want to end a friendship yourself? It's not so easy with someone who's sitting at the desk next to you. And of course, the consequences are even worse with office romances, irrespective of whether they end in heartbreak or happily ever after. In the end, you still have to interact with the person on a daily basis. And if they don't end, your coworkers start thinking that not everyone in the office is getting the same benefits. Well, we hope they're not getting the same benefits. So all businesses try to discourage office romances, but the catch is they don't give you time to meet anyone else. So the systems of the domestic realm, which used to include meeting people and relaxing without doing damage to your career, have been pushed aside. The point of having a business persona is to avoid the consequences of bringing your personal life to work and vice versa. We get letters from people who feel betrayed because their friends fired them, or who feel pressured to invite everybody in the office to their weddings, or to share their lunch, or to bring coworkers presents when they come back from vacations. And that's even before we get to the pressure to support the fiction of office's family by attending constant office parties, or working overtime or mandatory hours socializing. You know, the office is going out for a drink after work. It's great for team building. And this is seldom a casual invitation, even if they don't say that you'll be letting the team down by wanting to go home at the end of the day. You know what we used to call this? Unpaid overtime. What seems to be forgotten is that you have a real family and maybe even real friends. You can find them by looking up from your smartphone when you're off duty. We spend enough time in the office. There need to be limits, or people will fail both at having a personal life and having a professional life. Now, we are far from minimizing the competing claims and the difficulties of trying to have a professional and a personal life. Nick's job at the opera requires both night and day work, and he has a working wife and a toddler. And I had a similar working situation when he and his sister were growing up. We know what everyone is up against. Even the offices that purport to be family friendly either aren't really, or they count on the single people or the childish people to make up for the family duties of others, which is not fair either. Nobody has sufficient time for work or for family and friends. And the reason is that we're still operating on the 19th century Industrial Revolution business plan, by which one person, the man, has the job and earns the living, and another person takes care of all the other things in life, the child rearing, social life, philanthropy, not to mention writing all the thank you letters, child rearing. Well, who's in charge of the private realm now? Women still are, of course, and with the help, if they're lucky, of nice husbands. They're struggling to do the jobs, both jobs, but the jobs remain designed for workers who have no such responsibility because they have wives to take care of that. So they are free to stay late for after-hours drinks and to go on frequent retreats or business trips, or to stay late. Well, with the private realm gone, or the jurisdiction over that, who stays home with the children on snow days? What's happened to that private realm? Remember the services that it was able to provide. Well, the thank you letters, which have pretty much disappeared, but also stepping in spontaneously to help others when they needed it because there was some flexibility. Arranging occasions, whether they were church socials or debutante parties for people to meet one another with romance in mind, and just providing venues to relax without any danger of harming the career. So I want the private realm back, but heaven forbid, not under the old system. You know, etiquette is thought to always want to go back to the good old days when everybody behaved perfectly, which I would love to do if someone could tell me when that was. The gender divide system was a terrible idea. Even then, even the good business manners of those days were only practiced towards certain people. It was very uneven. The first names were used for low-level workers, women, African Americans, other groups, who were expected to show respect by using titles for the white male upper-level employees. It was a very limited type of courtesy, and I wish I'd been in charge when people decided to change it and make it more equal, because I would have mandated respect for everyone instead of for no one, which is the way the playing field was leveled. Systematic changes are needed, major systematic changes, and they are mighty slow in coming. One reason that they're slow is the lack of realization of just how oppressive this situation now is. With all the tensions from home that it's created, work probably does seem more relaxing than home. You may like not having to wear constrictive clothes at work, even though you're disgusted by the people who wear flip-flops or show too much chest, whether it's a hairy chest or a round one, or parade expensive outfits or offensive words on their T-shirts. You probably like having goof-off time on the office computer, and how are you to know that the company kept a record of all the sites you visited? You may like all that socializing at work. Comes with free cake, doesn't it? Sometimes drinks. But in any way, so-called social life has become so businesslike that it's not much of a treat. The whole concept of hospitality has been sabotaged. First time I got a Thanksgiving letter in which someone told me after Thanksgiving that the family had been charged by the head for Thanksgiving dinner by the relative who gave it, I thought it was a joke. I get them every year now, several of them. It's not a joke. And people who give think or claim they are giving parties then give out food assignments. You're supposed to bring this or that, or even charge. The concept of hospitality has been taken over by this business-like approach. The concept of exchanging presents, an ancient symbolic show of goodwill, has been taken over by business-like methods. What we do now, instead of exchanging presents, is we exchange shopping lists, the gift registry for everything, or just plain payment. Somehow the parties that are given are all seen to be connected with occasions where presents are expected. And one is advised to use them networking, furthering the job. So I can understand that people think, well, there's not really much real social life to go back to. And, you know, you will say, well, okay, you really like your coworkers, except for the ones that smell bad, which I get huge amounts of mail about. Half of it is about people who smell bad because they don't use commercial products that they should use, and the other half is from about people who smell bad because they use commercial products that smell bad, that have fragrances and things. And the people who talk too loudly, or they don't clean the coffee machine, or they steal your lunch from the refrigerator, or they chime in on your conversation, and so on. And you claim some of them are real friends until they take credit for your work or get the promotion that you hope to get. There is a big, big difference between real friends and the pseudo-friend who is a colleague. I'm not saying you can't make friends on the job, but would they still love you if you were not there? Your family has different duties. Businesses are supposed to look after you, are supposed to produce a productive workforce and make it efficient. If your boss says you're one big family, he's probably the one who fired his grandmother, who used to be productive, but she's fallen off, and business is business. Your family is supposed to especially look after you when you are in need, or when your productivity is falling off and they're taking care of you. The inevitable tragedy of pseudo-friendship occurs at the end of the job, when the job is over. If you're fired, or even if you retire with a big send-off after a successful career. And everybody says, we must get together for lunch. But somehow they don't. They're no longer available for lunch. If you're fired, they don't look you in the eye, or they say to you, you think you have it bad. We have to do more work now that thank you so much for the sympathy. I learned the tragedy of this on a very high level when I used to cover embassy life for the Washington Post, and there were ambassadors who retired here, foreign ambassadors. They said, well, we have so many friends in Washington. And then a few weeks later, or a few months later, they would say, our friends have deserted us. Well, their friends had expense accounts to entertain people in comparable jobs. They were not friends, however luxurious the social life that they were doing. And obviously, when it no longer made business sense for their countries, the friendship, so-called friendship, dissolved. And it's very, very tragic to see that happen. Happens all the way up and down the scale of employment, from the highest to the lowest. Realizing the damage caused by the present setup is the beginning, I hope, of demanding and achieving major social change. But it's only the beginning, and it's out of my control. What we are modestly offering in this book, in the meantime, is a guide to the principles and the day-by-day particulars of coping with the situation as it is, unhampered by the phony assumptions and unburdened by the false obligations that are just making things worse. And we're hoping that that way that you will remember to find time to listen to the hopes and dreams of your family and friends, and not find yourself embarrassed to ask for more money at the workplace. Thank you. Now, if there are any questions, yes. Yes, I'm going to repeat the question in case you all didn't hear it. It's about cliquish behavior at the workplace. It's, I believe, what is known, if she's talking about people who always have lunch together and don't want anybody else to join them and that kind of thing. We call that high school. And it has survived there. This is a classic example of what's wrong with pretending that everybody is friends. If lunch hour is lunch hour, fine, go off and eat with the people you like. And why do you want to join them? Well, if you have business to discuss, then it's a business lunch, and then you don't get to say you can't participate if your job description gets you into this. So I would not spend a lot of time worrying about the mean girls who won't let you sit at the cafeteria table. Lunch hour is free time. If you are on cordial terms with your coworkers, you don't have to worry about them loving you or about loving them. But when you're excluded for information you need, that is exactly, yeah, when it's a business thing. And then you have to say, I need to know the agenda here. Is this a business lunch? Are we going to bring up topic A, B, and C, and so on? Or I missed the session when you were discussing this. Please explain it to me. But it goes by job situation, not by we like you and we don't like you. Other questions? Yes, Henry.
Hi. 20 years ago, everybody went into an office and worked there 35 to 40 hours a week at roughly the same time. Now people are teleworking, they're working different hours, and so on. How does that play into this? It seems to me people are spending less time together in the workplace than they might have been.
I'm sorry, less time together in the sense that they're working.
They're working from home, for example, a couple days a week and things like that. Will that maybe alleviate some of these problems?
Let me see if I've got you right on this. That it used to be everybody was in the workplace at the same time in the same place. Now some people are working from home and they're telecommunicating or other things. Yes, that is a idea of making. It's one of the measures, telecommunicating and working at home. One of the measures trying to make life a little bit more bearable for people who have conflicting duties. And the communication within the office has gone electronic. People don't get together and talk, which, except when they're having drinks afterwards. And I'm shocked now when I go into newsrooms. I grew up in Washington Post newsroom. It's all silent now. If you have something to say to the person at the next desk, you email it. People don't talk. This is, in that particular business, I don't think that's very productive. But I am in favor of the flexibility of not having to be there. Well, the 9 to 5 job you described was for the man whose wife was home with the children on snow day and was home to greet the children and so on. And it was a very lopsided situation. So I have no nostalgia for that. Anybody? Yes. The question is, did I condone, or she says I'm condoning men bringing out tissues to, or whether they should use a handkerchief or a tissue. I'm on the handkerchief side of this argument, but I'm not prepared to argue with people who want to talk about health issues. I will say that I believe you're saying that if women should not apply lipstick at the table, men should not blow their noses at the table. Bodily functions. So, yes, okay, bodily functions. Eating is a bodily function. You do that at the table. And there are some things that occur unexpectedly, and we have a little sympathy for that, which includes perhaps an occasional sneeze, which I hope is caught by a handkerchief. No, do I condone big honking nose blowing at the table? No, I do not. You should excuse yourself for that. Yes. Any other questions? Oh, yes. Thank you. Yes. It is. The lady brought up one of my all-purpose formulas for when people just insult you to your face. And the answer is, I beg your pardon. Nobody should mistake that for a literal statement. It is very conducive to saying you spoke out of turn. Yes.
I was just going to comment on this gentleman's question over here. The fact that he talked about people that are not working 9 to 5 in the same place, and you said, well, it is a, there's some good attributes to that, and it's allowed different freedom. But I can appreciate the challenge in writing your book and taking on the whole business world, because that in itself has led to everybody being connected to their smartphones 24/7, and feeds that problem of not being able to keep business and social separate.
Absolutely, and we address the problem of being connected 100% of the time. The emails and the phone calls and the texting that do not stop after work hours, which is what I referred to before as unpaid overtime, and I'm very much against that. Yes, the borders have become, are disappearing. I'm sorry to say, with the cooperation of employees, it's not just demanding bosses, people who feel that their work is so much more important than their families and their friends and their private obligations that they must stay connected all the time. And as I said earlier, who will use the excuse of work to get out of everything that resembles a personal duty. And that has to be resisted. I sympathize with the person whose boss expects it. And I think the answer there is for the employees to get together, and because one person refusing to do it is penalized. A whole office full of people refusing to do it has to be listened to. But this is one of the main points I try to make in the book, is that cutoff of when you are on social time and when you are on work time. Very important, yes.
Something I've always wondered, when I send an email and say thank you in an email chain, I start hearing people say, oh, I hate getting thank you emails, I just have to delete them. And I never know, in a business setting, do you send that little thank you or not?
The question is about people who, in a business setting, say they hate getting thank you notes. Well, thank you so much to them for sabotaging politeness. How much of a burden is it to get a nice little note that says thank you for doing this? I would certainly continue to do it. It is, I'm not the only person who recommends that job applicants thank the interviewer and so on. People do like to be thanked, except for the few sourpusses who are trying to stamp it out, and pooey on them. Yeah. Huh? Yes. The question is about everybody being connected with their electronics at the dinner table, and this lady says her 7-year-old granddaughter is objecting to this because she wants real conversation. Would she like to come and work for me? Because she sounds like a natural. Yeah, yes. Electronics have no place at a dinner table. Period. I know hosts who have gone to the extreme of having little baskets where they say, "Here, you can we'll collect your cell phone before you sit down." It dates back to when people would have the television on during dinner. Nothing other than the dinner table is the center of civilization. It's not only where you learn to eat, which is not practiced so much anymore, but it is where you learn to have conversation. It's where you learn to have consideration for others. It's where you learn, stop throwing peas at your sister and your father is trying to tell you something. Ask your brother what kind of a day he had, that kind of thing. That's where all this happens. And once you turn the family dinner into you abolish it, which for many people have done, or you turn it into another business section, that's the end of civilized social behavior. Thank you all so much.